Well, thank y'all for coming so much. How many of you have been to one of these before? If you show up hands. Okay, and those this is your first time? Wonderful, wonderful. Well, welcome to those who it's their first time, and welcome back to those who've been here before. This is just a time where we can get together as the city administration and elected officials to showcase what our departments are doing and give the citizens an opportunity to come together and ask questions, get to know the staff that they're working on and that they're working with. And I just really want to give another warm round of applause for our staff because they do such a great job year in and year out. So to give you just a brief outline of what we're going to be talking about tonight, actually the whole presentation was right here in 5 minutes, so I don't know what I'm going to be talking about. We're going to go over the organizational changes, go into more specifics about capital projects, growth and development, some public safety, and then the social service initiatives that we've implemented over the last year. And then we're going to try to save about 15, 20 minutes for questions. So you'll see 2 mics, one over here on each side. So if you have a question when we get to that point, just line up behind there and state your name and your question and we'll answer it. And if we can't answer it, we'll make sure that we get your contact information so somebody can get you the information that you want. So real briefly, as the presentation stated, the video stated, basically as our city manager, Todd Heilman, he's no longer the new city manager. He is the city manager. So what a great job he has done. And he brought to the city a philosophy of core values. And those core values being integrity, fiscal responsibility, transparency, and outstanding customer service. And I hope that as we go through here and in your day-to-day experience with city staff that you see those working out every day. And if you don't, then I will tell you staff is more than open and wants to hear the feedback because everybody and everything can improve. And that's no different for me as an elected official, for any of my colleagues who are elected officials, or for our city staff. That's our goal, is to make sure how can we do the best job that we can do. So the first one we talked about was integrity. The City Council passed a comprehensive ethics ordinance that applies to city officials, to former city officials in a limited capacity, and also to city employees. They did that in May of last year. The ethics board got seated sometime, I think, in September or October, and they're already looking at having meetings to determine how do we tweak that, because whenever you have a new document such as that that's very important to the city, it's important you go back and look at what can we do differently, what changes do we need to make based upon the experiences that we've had. Fiscal responsibility. Since Mr. Heilman has been here, I think we've had the effective tax rate has been the base rate that we've started with. And for those of you who don't really know what the effective tax rate is, basically, and there's a lot of exceptions, but it's basically the city tries to collect the same amount of taxes that it did last year, except for new growth. So if you have a tremendous amount of appraisal increases, then therefore the tax rate is able to come down. So we've decreased the tax rate, I believe, 2 years in a row in that regard. And that's the fiscal responsibility. Transparency. Mr. Heilman and the City Council has been totally committed to how do we maintain and improve our transparency as a city government so that our citizens understand exactly what we're doing, they see how we're doing it, and there's nothing left to chance other than if we have to have a closed session because of some reason that is best for the city to do that. We've added the agendas and the minutes for all city council committees and boards and commissions to the city website. In the past, those you just sort of had to ask for those, but we've added them to the website so that you don't have to go hunt for those or call somebody to get them. The next one I think is probably, and this is just me and nobody knows I'm going to say this, but I think this next core value is the one that we've made the biggest strides in, which personally I think has shown the biggest impact to our citizenry, and that is outstanding customer service. One thing that Mr. Heilman brought to our city was the philosophy of you are the customer. We've always known that, but we needed to treat you like you are the customer. One of the things that they've done is they've created new apps. And so there's a new app that was previewed here, and there's a sign out front called Engage Denton. How many of you do not have the Engage Denton app on your smartphone? Raise your hand. Okay, all right. I was going to ask who all did, but those who raised their hand, before the end of the night or the end of this week, I want you to download Engage Denton. Let me just give you a brief preview of what that is. It's an app where if you're out driving around and you see a pothole, you can stop, you can pull the app up, you can mark it with a GIS, and then you can send a report to the city. That report comes into a clearinghouse that gets distributed to the proper departments. And how easy can that be? You're driving by and a street light is out. Now you might have to get out and maybe look at the street light pole. We're trying to fix how we do that. But you can report if street lights are out. So I really would encourage you to download that app. I think they've had over 1,000 apps, and there's been like 2,300 requests on that app since June of last year. That's about 300 or 400 a month. So we certainly want to increase that. The city staff might not like me saying that, but it does give us, because you are the eyes and ears of city staff. So help us help you by letting us know where the problems are before they become such a big problem that it raises the frustration level of the community. Capital projects. The city over the last, since the bond program of 2012 and 2014 has committed, and the voters have approved $118 million worth of bond money to do various projects. But there's one thing I want to talk about before we get into the bond projects, and I think it's important because it's an ongoing, real-time situation that we've had several emails about. There may be some questions that come up at the end of the presentation on that, and that is, what is the city doing to help alleviate and to improve the safety along Hickory Creek Road, where there was a tragic accident where 2 young men in our community lost their lives. And I want to share with you what I received today. The county and the city have been working ever since then together to figure out what can we do and what can we do quickly to ensure and mitigate that kind of situation and that kind of tragedy happening again, because nobody in this room and nobody in this city wants to see that happen. So here are some of the things, and some of them were outlined in a newspaper article, but these are ones that I've been told that the city and the county have agreements to these, so if that's not right, I'm going to say some things, and I'm going to be committing some people. The county, because of their government process, is able to get guardrails very quickly and get them installed very quickly. So the county and the city are working together to where they will begin installing guardrails, weather permitting, and those kinds of things next week. That goes from, I believe it's the curves on Hickory Creek Road to Farm to Market Road 1830, which is right up there where the bridge is. Yes, yes. And the city has agreed, because the county can do it quickly, get the contractors on the ground, the city has agreed to split that cost 50-50. So we've worked very well with them, and they've been actually stellar working with us as well. What is the city going to do? The city's going to be installing reflective striping on the road to make sure that as people are driving on the road, they understand the contours of the road. They're also going to be putting in, I'm going to have to read this because I can't remember it, reflective raised pavement markers, buttons and reflectors, basically, to help people see that. And that's going to be started next week as well with the guardrail installation. Or they may have to come sort of behind each other. Also, the city is going to be installing reflective signage that shows the curvature, that there's a curve ahead. And I don't know if you are familiar with the crosswalk there at City Hall across McKinney Street, but somebody can press a button and LED lights light up. I believe we're going to have that kind of sign as well, but that's about a 3 or 4 week lead time, and I think it's going to be, where's the engineer? I think it's going to be motion activated. Is that correct? As people drive, is that what's going to happen? Radar detected. Yeah, motion activated. Radar detected. And those, so worst case scenario, as long as the suppliers with the signs, we will have that installed within 4 weeks. The others are being started next week. So I wanted to take some time to really in detail explain and share with you what the county and the city is doing together in order to really improve from a public safety perspective that stretch of the road. Long term, real quickly, we've had these discussions in the past, and we've been moving in this goal. The goal long term, and I say long term, I'll tell you what that means, is they're going to straighten out Hickory Creek Road. So that means we're going to have a couple bridges over the floodplain. The City of Denton will be considering an engineering contract this coming up in February to design that full span of the road. It's going to take about 12 months at best, 24 months worst case scenario time-wise to get the full construction design and drawings. And then once that's done, in the meantime, we'll begin to identify funding for that stretch of the road and working with the county to see how can we come together to really permanently change the configuration of that road. So I did want to take some time to share that with you. Okay, capital projects. Some of you might have already seen this. It's called the City of Denton Construction Guide. It should be coming in the mail. If it hadn't, it will be. And let us know if somehow you don't receive it. But I really encourage you to look through it because what it is, it's phenomenal. And I really want to thank city staff for putting this together because y'all did a wonderful, excellent job. It's got all the different kinds of projects, road projects, with how much that cost, what the percentage of completion it is, some timelines, identifies specific streets, and goes into more detail with some of those other projects. So really would encourage you to pull that out and take a look at that. And that's another one of those implementations, those initiatives of the customer service to really get the citizens involved, engage them, but also give them information that is useful. Because like the video said, and like we're going to talk about here now, we've got a lot of road projects. We've done 18 lane miles of new construction. Well, we've probably torn up 18 lane miles of construction. And some see that as a bad thing, but actually we are catching up finally, and we are getting our roads in good shape. And I think you're seeing it make a difference, and we're really beginning to catch that curve of not catching up from being behind, but getting caught up and then being able to get ahead. In 2014 and 12, as I said, there's been $118 million worth of bond package funding approved by you all, the voters. $82 million for street improvements, $16 million for public safety improvements, $8.5 million for storm, water, and drainage improvements, and $11.3 million for park system improvements. TxDOT is also spending approximately $114 million on the different Texas highways and roads that they're responsible for. $37.6 million for Farm to Market Road 2181, which is Teasley Lane. $43 million for US 377. US 377 is finally going to happen. Fort Worth Drive coming into town is going to, and that's a huge project. $43 million. $33 million for improvements to the main lanes of I-35, Mayhill, Brinker, and Loop 288 intersections. That's that little small section where you go from 3 lanes to 2 lanes, and then it branches back out. I would try to tell you what the time frame is on that, but I think it's going to be summer or fall. The weather in the fall, where we had 30 inches of rain in about a 30 to 60 day period, which is almost the amount of rain we have in a whole year, really just brought everything to a screeching halt. As the video stated, beginning the second runway, construction of the second runway for the Denton Enterprise Airport, it always still surprises me and blows my mind when I hear that the Denton Enterprise Airport is the 9th busiest airport in the state of Texas. That's just, when you think about it, that's phenomenal. We've completed, and for the public improvements in parks and trails, we've completed the Northwest Trail, the extension of the Sequoia Park Trail, the Carl G. Young Senior Park Spray Ground. Who's been to that? The spray ground? It's wonderful. I mean, it's, I remember when they opened it up, it was such a wonderful event. And they've begun construction on the Vela Athletic Complex, which is out there at North Lakes, which is adding, is it 4, 6? I think it's 6 soccer fields, it's 6, yeah. We're also working to update the planning documents, including the Drainage Master Plan, the Mobility Master Plan, the Master Thoroughfare Plan, Master Pedestrian Plan, and Master Bicycle Plan. We are in just a tremendous time of really increasing and getting a good vision of how do we want to move around in this city. Because we're growing. And probably by 2025, 2030, they're expecting 200,000 people in the city of Denton, if not more. So that's another 60,000 that we have. You're right. Said, tell them to leave their cards at home. Progress on some other projects that we have some major progress on is the beginning construction of the PEC 4 Phase 1 and Phase 2 drainage improvements. You say, what is that, PEC 4? It's a major drainage thoroughfare that goes also through downtown. And what we're trying to do is pull some of the land that's in the floodplain in downtown out of the floodplain. So we're putting in box culverts and things like that so that we can have more development in downtown, because right now when you're in the floodplain, it's virtually impossible to develop in the floodplain. Mayhill Road, $53.7 million project. That's going to be one of the major north-south thoroughfares, and $24.99, which has come in from State School Road. So now you're going to be able to go from 380 all the way to the airport if you need to. And it's not a bad drive. I've done that several times. So Mayhill's going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. Bonnie Bray, eventually from Loop 288 where the new high school is, all the way out to Vintage Boulevard. To the south is going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes from Vintage to Windsor, including widening Vintage Boulevard from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, which goes from 377. Vintage goes from 377 over to I-35W heading to Fort Worth. They've got phase 1 of the Bonnie Bray project on construction. It was the major project there was building a bridge across the Hickory Creek floodplain there along by Vintage and Roselawn. And phase 2 is set to start in this fall in 2019. Part of that is putting in, is it a 52-inch water line, 42-inch water line? 42-inch water line. That's a big water line. In fact, somebody told me somebody had built a 108-inch water line. That's 9 feet or something like that. You could stand in it, and could you imagine the water going through that? McKinney Street widening. You know, one of the things that one of those public safety issues that we had was how were students, getting to Ryan High School? They were having to walk along the road, literally the road. And so that was a TxDOT project to widen McKinney from, I think, Bell all the way out past Ryan High School, but it was just taking too long, so TxDOT agreed and the city agreed to take over that project. So they transferred the funding to the city, and so they've started the construction, I believe. It's set to begin next month, from Loop 288 to Grisham Road to put in 4 lanes. We've already got some temporary sidewalks in there now. We had a grand opening, which I saw that picture of me. I had a Band-Aid on it. It's crazy. So the road, McKinney Street, is going to be 4 lanes, which is going to provide better public safety for the students who are walking, and quite frankly, better safety for the automobiles, because if you've been out there during school time, either getting to school or leaving, you got a 2-lane road, you got school buses, you got all these different kinds of this traffic. And so we've improved the safety of that. Growth and development. How many of you have tried to pull a permit in the last 6 months or a year? Okay, now y'all can't come to the mic and ask questions. We're going to exclude y'all. We're going to exclude y'all from doing that, all right? No, all kidding aside. That's probably one of the biggest challenges we've had. You know, when Mr. Heilman came, I will tell you, Todd has done an excellent job. I mean, when he came on board, our planning department, our permitting department, it was very difficult to get things through. You've all heard it. You've all heard the anecdotes that, you know, people trying to get permits through it. We've improved that by streamlining the process. People have said they've gone in on certain minor projects and gotten a permit in a day, and really while they're standing there at the window for fences and things like that. So we've improved it so that people can get in, get out, and get their projects started and get them completed. In fact, I was there one time pulling a permit, and there was a couple there that really is their first time, you could tell. And the staff basically just walked them through the process. And it was so good to see that's that customer service that is so important to this. So we've created a one-stop shop, reducing the number of steps in the review process by 50%. Cut it in half. Our permit growth, we've been doing that all while we've experienced a permit growth. And this isn't the number of permits. This is the number of permits we've had from last year above 2017 or 2016, 2017. Over 940 additional permits for residential and construction last year over 2 years ago, which was indicated a value of $117 million. People are coming to Denton and they're building. I mean, residential permits, somebody told me that they had like 3,000 or 4,000 lots somewhere within the pipeline, either in platting or in review period and things such as that. So we're growing, and it's important that we make sure that we do things efficiently, because if not, we'll return back, unfortunately, to those times where we can get bogged down. One of the major goals that the planning department and that area of the city are doing is we're rewriting the Denton Development Code. Now, the Denton Development Code, I don't know how many, was it 500 pages? I don't even know how big it is. It's about 3 or 4 or 5 inches thick. And that was approved, I think, back in 2000 or 2001. I don't know if you all remember when we went and did the whole rezoning of the city and we created a whole new Denton Development Code. Well, we're doing that again because there were some things in that code that we needed to fix. And it's been a long time coming. So there's a committee that has been working since the summer, meeting pretty much, given some time off every week to go over page by page of the new draft and the old code to try to reduce the unintended consequences and to try to tighten up the code and give predictability to those who come to Denton to develop so that they're not wondering or guessing, well, what's going to happen? What does this code mean? And then all of a sudden staff is put in a difficult position of, well, we have to interpret it. So what we're really trying to do is make sure that we present a code that is understandable, that is concise, that is efficient, and that gives people the predictability of this is what I need to do. Because if you've ever been in that situation where you have a gray area and you've got to talk to staff and figure it out, then it can get quite interesting. So we're rewriting the code. We're also rewriting the tree and landscape code, and we're also drafting a new historic preservation plan and establishing standards and guidelines for the downtown square district. Public safety. Went over it in the video, so I'll just go over it real quickly. New police chief. If you haven't met Chief Dixon, I certainly would invite you to do that. What a wonderful addition to our community, and he has hit the ground running and is making such great strides and implementing new programs to really bring his expertise from the city of Austin to our town. So thank you so much, Chief, for that, and welcome again to our city. Kenneth Hedges, Fire Chief, internal promotion, was in 31 years? Chief, where are you? There you are. The Chief and I had a chance to, when Hurricane Harvey hit, we got up on Labor Day of, I guess it was last year, and started at 3 o'clock in the morning because we had some fire personnel deployed down at Hurricane Harvey sites in the cities. And we were taking supplies down there to resupply them and also to provide other types of supplies to the community. So we drove literally all day and got back that same night to do that. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me. Number one, what you see on TV cannot compare to seeing what kind of destruction that occurred down in that part of the country and the state. As you got closer to the coast, you would start seeing a few trees down here and there. And as you got into the cities that were really devastated, I believe we were at Rockport, is that what it was? Power lines. Just like a toy kind of, those landscapes you have on train stations. Somebody just comes and knocks them down. It looked like a tornado had sat over that city for hours. Very, very, very little standing. So I was so proud of the men and women that we were able to send down there to help the people down there, including their fire and their public safety people, because their homes, their businesses were also damaged and destroyed. So kudos to the fire chief and to our men and women of our fire department, because they go a lot of places, just like our utility people. We sent people down with DME to go down and help with the restoration and getting those lines up. We just got a report. It's called the Police Executive Research Forum. It's called a PERF report that the city manager had asked to just come in, with a new fire chief. Let's come in and see what's the situation there at the police department, survey questions and the like. The report was about 50 or 60 pages. And as I was reading through it, the thing that I was impressed about was they would talk about recommendations. And typically at the end of the paragraph, already implemented. So I think they've implemented, probably 60, 70, 80, 90% of those recommendations. And many of them were simply policy statements, putting in writing the policies that they're already following, just to make sure that remember I talked about predictability in the planning and development process with the Denton Development Code? Here it is too, to make sure that there's no misunderstanding about what the policies and the procedures are for the men and women of our police department. And I really, that report, I think, really was helpful in us seeing, where's our department, where's it going, and I was very pleased with the outcome. It assessed department policies and procedures and also responded to critical incidents and organizational changes. Fire and EMS enhancements. Fire Station 4 is open. Have any of you been to the new fire stations when they were grand opening? Man, it's amazing. Fire Station 4, and I'm looking for my Jessica, who's got the sign of how much time I've got left. 2 minutes, wonderful. So actually, it's doing pretty good. Fire Station number 4 was a new fire station. It replaced the oldest fire station that we had, and it was 40 or 50 years old. You couldn't even get new apparatus in the door because they weren't built like that. So that was a long time coming, and we were able to do it because of the bond programs that you all passed. We opened up a new medic unit and 6 additional firefighters with Fire Station 4. Fire Station 4 didn't have a medic unit before the new fire station, and now it does. We opened the Joint Emergency Service District 1 fire station. You think, okay, well, that was in cooperation with another jurisdiction. Because what was happening was the southern western part of our city had some growth in it and has tremendous amount of growth potential with 6,000 acres out there that we're already looking at people who want to develop that. How did we get good, quick response time, especially out to Robeson Ranch? So when the new fire chief came on, I just asked him, can you go talk to the city of Northlake? Because there was a big subdivision going in out there in Northlake, which is literally across the street from Robeson Ranch Road. Long story short, we were able to work out a public-public partnership where we jointly operate that fire station and we provide some financial contributions, and they're contracted to be the primary first responders to an incident out at Robeson Ranch or in that part of our city. Number one, it decreased the response time, which increases public safety. And as a side benefit to those out there who might have been outside of this insurance rating that they use to rate insurance policies based upon fire response time, it's called an ISO rating. The City of Denton has an ISO, is it ISO? Of 2, all right? Which it goes from a scale of, I guess, 1 to 10, and 10 being the worst, 1 and 2 being the best. So we have one of the best ISO ratings, which means your property insurance, your casualty insurance, gets the best rate. Robeson had a 10. I believe it was a 10. So by the time they got that open, not only did they decrease the response time and increase the opportunity for fire personnel and EMS personnel to get there to them, they also got the benefit of probably some fairly substantial reduction in their insurance premiums. We've completed or we're completing the construction of the new fire training facility, which is right outside behind Fire Station number 7. And next year we're going to begin construction of Fire Station number 3, which is the one off of McCormick and I-35. It's going to be built right next to it. And then we're designing Fire Station number 8, which will be the first new fire station in the City of Denton in over 10 years. I've got social services. I'm going to go over a little bit, so okay. All right, they're not going to throw things at me. So some social service initiatives. The city was awarded about $2.1 million between various organizations and state and federal agencies. From CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, that's federal. Home, that's federal. ESG grants, which is Emergency Services Grants, that's a federal grant that's administered by the state for the 2017-18 program. About $450,000 of that went to provide 22 local service agencies through the Human Services Grant that help seniors through senior services, medical and mental health care, intermediate support, homeless prevention and assistance, and support for persons with disabilities and child youth services. In 2018, the city worked with the Denton County Homelessness Leadership Team to advance initiatives to help individuals and families experiencing homelessness or at risk of being homeless. You know, one of the most efficient ways to work on homelessness is just to prevent it, is to get people help before that one thing happens that they can't afford, and then all of a sudden they're out. And so we launched a public dashboard to help us understand the statistics, and to do that, the city provided funding to hire a housing navigator position. And what that does is these caseworkers in all these nonprofits who have people come to them that need help, that need services, that need housing, they would be responsible for going out and trying to find a place for those people to live. So their job was sort of bifurcated. How do I help them with the services? And then how to also help them find housing? And what we realized was that was inefficient, okay? Because they might not have an expertise in housing. Whereas we realized if we can hire a housing navigator, that's their responsibility. Instead of the caseworkers doing it, they simply say, okay, here's a need, help us find a place. And that's, I think they've been on board a few months, and I think it's already showing some impact because we can help more people because we're operating more efficiently. And I'm going to want to be sure and read this statistic. In 2018, we housed 107 households in Denton County from the Housing Priority List. The Housing Priority List is a list that's now created when these different social service agencies get together on a biweekly basis. It's county-wide for 15 to 20 case managers, and what they do is they look at this list that's been created through a new software program called the Homelessness Management Information System. Yes, HMIS is the only thing I know it by. And that's how we get our data. Before we didn't have that. And so we didn't really know who was out there and what kind of help did they need. So now they're having meetings every 2 weeks to identify people where they can find some housing for those individuals. One of the things that I think is very important, which it might not sound very important, but in 2018, the Denton County Homelessness Leadership Team, in conjunction with the Denton County Homeless Coalition, launched what's called the Barriers Fund. And the Barriers Fund is anything, but anybody in this room can contribute to the Barriers Fund. It's administered through United Way, and that fund is very simple. People can come and apply for funds from that fund to prevent homelessness. In other words, I'm behind on my rent. My car just broke down, and if I don't get it fixed, I'm not able to go to work. And if I lose my job, guess what happens? And all these little things that can happen that are big things. And it just takes sometimes a little help and a little financial help. So I really encourage you, if you can't do it, talk to your friends, because this is a fund that's unrestricted by federal rules and regulations. In fact, this can come alongside other different kind of federal programs to really provide that hump over a bad situation. So I'm just going to put a plug in for it. If you feel so inclined, contact United Way and see how you can be involved. Because if you can't be involved in helping in a nonprofit, you can certainly be involved by helping with the resources. We're updating our strategic plan. And then finally, we've announced that we joined the challenge to end veteran homelessness by 2020. When I got elected, since we got elected, we've been able to acquire 20 what's called Veterans Administration Supportive Housing Vouchers from Housing and Urban Development. We weren't getting any before then. Those are administered through the Denton Housing Authority. That literally allows 20 homeless veterans to receive housing, but not just housing. They also receive wraparound services from different social agencies to help them with, maybe financial planning, helping them with their medications, helping them get to appointments, whatever they need, life skill or life situation they need, they're there to help them. So that's it. I mean, what time is it? How much time did I go over? 5 minutes? Well, that's all I have, but the fun part about this isn't y'all listening to me drone on and on. The fun part to me is to hear what you have to say and to hear what you want to know about our city and the questions that you have. So we have 2 mics right here. And so we'll take about 15 or 20 minutes to answer questions. If you could, just state your name, state your question briefly, and I'll give as concise answer as I can. And as I stated before, if I don't know the answer, then we'll get somebody to do that. And there's some cards back there that you can fill out. And I'll just say this one last time. I talk to second graders every year because they're studying government. So I'll meet with, what is the class size? 150, 200 second graders? I don't know. And let me tell you, they have no shortage of questions. So don't let the second graders outdo you. I can't tell you how much money I have in my pocket because I don't have any. But that's one of the questions. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
My name is Alicia Jordan.
Yes.
So I am new to Denton, about 5 years. Got here as soon as I could. I love Denton. I work for a nonprofit. I'm very involved in the community, helping with counting the homeless and doing all this different things with United Way. But one of my other positions, my real job, is that I work with nonprofit children. So my passion, my heart is with children and the homeless. And I see all the wonderful things that we're doing because I'm a part of a lot of the meetings and the classes, and so I'm like, yes, Denton. But one of the things that I didn't hear that I feel like is a huge need in the community is transportation. I know we have little baby buses, but they're far and in between, and I Uber part-time. It's one of my 10th jobs. And so I appreciate the streets, appreciate that being fixed. But the people that I hear, the people of Denton that I Uber around, there's the need is transportation, and it's a handicap for people to get to work. Or I have a teacher at one of our schools that's way off 377, and he rides a bike that I bought him because he was walking to school every day to help these children and to be a teacher and a man and a role model in the class. And that it's not just him. So I want to see what are we doing, what can we do about transportation?
That's a great question.
Thank
so I know that I've seen them here. Denton County Transportation Authority. If y'all could raise your hand. There they are right over here in a group. That's a great question. And the wonderful thing is the City of Denton and DCTA are, number one, we've had a good partnership. We're continuing to have that. And we're really beginning to examine how do we approach our transportation just mode in general. And how do we meet the needs of people who maybe don't fit into a fixed bus route system or have other kinds of needs? So they are exploring that with every one of the member cities. And so I would certainly encourage you that if, at the end of the conversation to have a conversation with them, because they are very open and responsive to those kinds of needs. And I'm glad that you expressed that, because that is something that we want to make sure is that we have a public transportation system that meets as many needs as we can. And sometimes it means looking at ways and methodologies and procedures and that might need some tweaking. So we are working on that. So thank you so much for your question. That's a great question. I'm going to come over here. Yes, sir.
I'm Philip Young, and Chris, I just want to thank you for being so proactive in a very depressing time when our federal government can't seem to get its act together. It was very refreshing to hear what's happening, and I want to say you're a step ahead of me on my biggest concern, because on December 23rd, I was on my way to Dallas picking someone up off of Hickory Creek Road. It was raining. I didn't see that first curve. I lost control of the car. I ran off an embankment. By the grace of God, I wasn't injured. My car wasn't damaged. It was held up by a bunch of thick vines, and 6 people converged on me, one with a winch, and pulled me out. By the time police officers were on their way, I was already on my way to pick up my guests. So thank you so much for being a step ahead of me and being very proactive in remedying that situation, because it is very, very dangerous. And I'd like to ask people to give a round of applause for you and the city being so proactive in terms of taking care of so many of these things.
Well, and I'm going to also say that applause is for the county as well, because they've worked fearlessly together with us over this last week. I mean, you can't imagine to do the things we're doing if we were just doing it through the regular bureaucratic channels. Would be a lot different. So thank you so much for that, Philip. But I really want to also just thank the county for all their cooperation and their help, and just including us in the process, because the road is owned by both the city and the county. And so sometimes when you have those jurisdictional differences, things can happen. But in this case, I'm really proud of those who've been on the ground to really make sure we find the right solution. So thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak. I'm Susan Whitmer. I'm a commuter cyclist, and I want to thank the City of Denton for having a bike and pedestrian czar, and acknowledging that, we need more cycling infrastructure. We're a 2-university town, and I would like to see more people on bikes, but what I hear when people see me cycle, they'll come up to me and say, "Gosh, you're so brave. You're cycling in these mean streets." Well, I find that cycling in some of the greatest bicycling cities in the world, like Amsterdam, Boulder, Portland, I come back and I feel so empowered, and that's because they have the bike lanes, and they just have the atmosphere of promoting cycling. It's not a weird thing to do, except I realize I grew up in Texas. I know everybody needs their car because of various reasons, but I'm just curious. Do we have a plan when we expand 377? Is there going to be a bike lane? It scares me when I drive down 377 and I see cyclists. I'm pretty fearless, but I wouldn't ride a bike down 377.
That's a good question that off the top of my head I do not know the answer to. Does anybody know the answer to that? City staff not yet? Okay. Okay, yeah. Since that's a TxDOT, we've got to work in cooperation with them, and I believe what he said was it's not in the plan currently, but as a long-term plan for the corridor, that's something that they'll be looking at. So when it's just the city streets and we have pretty much all the jurisdiction, that's what's helpful. But then sometimes when you're working with TxDOT, especially highways, it gets a little more challenging. So, but thank you so much for your comments. And I want to thank the cycling community, because I think we're that way in a large part because of the advocacy of your group and the advocacy of the citizens to ensure that all modes of transportation have a safe passage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll leave with like Portland and Colorado both have large college student populations as well, and I think we could improve our image as a university town with more cycling infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. And be sure and let her get your contact information so we can get you some more detailed information on that.
Great, thanks.
You bet. No. Go ahead, Lenny.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for the new signs around town, directional signs, because they're wonderful. They're big enough for us who don't have very good vision. We can read them as we drive along. We don't have to slow down and stop, things like that. So they're wonderful. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Then would you talk a little bit about the downtown square and kind of tell us what you see in the future for that, and explain why you put the on the corners, they come out so far. You can.
Sure.
It seems problematic, and
I don't see anybody lined up at the other mic, so I can't go over there, so I'm going to have to be forced to answer this. That's a good question, and if I can't, I might have to call upon a couple of staff members to help with some of the detail of that question. The downtown square, of course, as I mentioned, we're working on a set of design standards and criteria to help us with future development in downtown. And I'm going to be truthful, part of that was spurred in a large part because of the tragic fire that we had on the square. And we realized that our codes were such that, did we have any type of codes that would allow us to have some kind of, control's too strong of a word, but guidelines on what goes back there. So that's really what we're doing there. As far as the jut outs, does anybody have an answer? Are you talking about where on the corners where there's the pavers and where sometimes there's those bicycle stands and things such as that? Anybody know an answer to that question? Traffic calming? Traffic calming. That's always an interesting term. Traffic calming. So I think I can go a little bit off that. So part of the problem was you had a tremendous amount of, we had a tremendous amount of, we've got now a tremendous amount of pedestrian activity in downtown. I mean, you go there any night, basically, and there are people everywhere, which is great. But you also had Locust and Elm coming in, or going out, that, you're coming down Locust or Elm Street heading towards the square, and, it's a 30, 35 mile an hour road. So we wanted to make sure that once you got to the square, you realized it was time to change your driving habits because you got so many crosswalks. So I'm going to let you take it from there briefly, and then we'll take a couple more questions. Yes.
Hi, my name is Pritam, and traffic engineer for the city. Primarily, the reason for that particular area and around those 4 intersections is to get the pedestrians more in a visible area, to bring them forward, because there's parking in the backside. If cars are driving and they're parked cars, when you get to the intersection, you're more visible, that they see you, that you're waiting. There's more waiting area for people to wait, and then before they cross. And then it also narrows the distance between where you cross the vehicles, so the crosswalk length is shorter. So those are the advantages. It's more for a pedestrian benefit, and also a benefit for the cars to see pedestrians.
Yeah.
Safety concerns.
Okay. All right. Okay, yes, sir.
My name's Mark Arnold. 30 years ago, there was a fight outside my office. Called the police. They showed up in 30 seconds. 17 years ago, a boy was beat up in my front yard with a tire knocker by a gang. Called the police. 20 minutes later, they show up, pull over the car, matching a description, don't make an arrest. 4 years ago, my wife's car's in the street, gets shot, call the police. They said, go online and fill out a report. Nobody shows up. So as Denton grows, what are we doing to keep up with that?
That's a great question. One of the things, that's one of the reasons for our PERF report, which is the report I was telling you about, is how can we improve efficiencies? And I think that's one of the things, and Chief, if you want to speak to that at some point, or be sure and get some contact information so we can go into a little bit more detail about that. But we recognize that both for our fire and our police response times, we have some work to do on that. And I think that's what the new leadership is working on, is what policies and procedures can we put in place in order to maximize or minimize the response times for both fire, EMS, and police, because that's important. I mean, I certainly can understand your concern with that data that you've experienced. So that is something we're constantly looking at. And I would encourage you, and the chief or someone with the chief will get back with you to help explain some of that. But Chief, do you have anything you want to add to that? Is that? Sorry, Chief. Come on, man. He's going to get me for this one. Yeah.
So the short answer to a pretty complicated question, we're doing some studies right now to look at how we are delivering services from the police standpoint, how we can reallocate police officers across the city so we can deliver the services quicker to you when you call 911. We're also looking at how we can leverage technology to help us in doing that. And the last thing we're doing is we're doing a very comprehensive study on our growth potential for the city and where we need to grow as a police department. So we're trying to get ahead of the growth so the city can grow into us and us not have to chase the growth.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. And one of the things that's important is during the budget process, because then you look at, what is the need for the police department as far as patrol officers and things like that. So we've got 3 people lined up at the podium. So I'm going to, unless somebody just jumps up and runs back behind, we're going to let these 3 questions be the last one for the evening. And I really do appreciate your patience here and listening to the presentation and also the questions. So I'm going to go over here to Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Always appreciate your Q&As because they're so informative. They're great. I'm going to give you the punchline first and then the question second. The punchline is we need more feedback on our development process.
Okay.
Because I was in a meeting 3 months ago, and it turns out I had a particular use because I work in the development angle of the world, and I had a particular use that was not listed in our development code, in our present development code. Then we tried to come in with a proposal, and we tried to fit that square peg in a round hole. That did not work. Right. So that particular investor left Denton and with, irritated. So, but the point being is that we have come to staff. Staff has tried to work with us a little bit. The challenge I'm having, and this is not a knock on staff at all, but I would appreciate if we had a little better method for feedback to come from staff back to the point of origination where the question was originally
Yes.
Brought up. Because we have a challenge, first of all, that you have a use that's not listed. Secondly, we don't know where we are. Suddenly the code's going to come out, and then we were out of the loop, that we missed something, that we didn't work through it prior to it being presented.
Okay. So the question, or
The question is, we need a little more feedback
Okay.
from staff prior to us getting too far down the road with this new code.
okay, well, I know during this process and the new reviewing the Denton Development Code and rewriting it, I know that they've met with several developer groups, and certainly I would encourage you or anybody that you know that if somehow you haven't gotten into that loop to get into that.
I've been in those meetings.
Okay, so we need to, because it's only through that kind of feedback that we get, and that's one of the reasons why we're rewriting it, because there's some things that just didn't show up, and instead of us trying to, in the past, trying to find some way to create it, it's not there. What do you do with it? So it's vitally important that we get the input from the development community as we continue to move through this.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. You bet. Yes, ma'am.
Luann Autry, I want to return back to downtown. On Elm Street, I want to know, what can we do to light a fire under the owners of the burnt building there? It has caused me so much grief since it's been burnt a year or longer.
You talking about the one on Locust that's between Jupiter House
It's
and Lucky
on
Duck?
Elm Street,
Elm
between
Street.
Sycamore and Stroud.
Oh, that one. Yes, yes, yes.
I can't believe how long it's
Gotcha.
been burnt in that
Yeah.
condition. We've had homeless people, etc.,
Yeah.
in that vicinity. What can I do to light a fire under that and at least get it raised? I understand if construction can't start tomorrow, but at least can we raise that?
Well, I think the best thing that you've done is ask that question tonight. So I would certainly encourage you to give your contact information, and so the appropriate staff and departments that deal with different types of code enforcement and dangerous buildings and substandard buildings and things such as that, to be able to give you some information on what's happening. There may be some things happening that we're not aware of, and if there's not, why not? So that's a great question. I do know that it's the one beside Penders is the one you're talking about. Yes, yes. The one beside Penders. It's hard to see, but it's the apartment fire up at the top. It's the one beside Penders on the south side of the square. Yes, sir.
All right,
You're our final question.
So good news. I don't want to talk about the roads.
Okay. It might be an easier question, so go ahead. I don't know what your question is going to be. I might want to talk about roads.
So my question is, you talk about increasing efficiencies and increasing customer service and all of these really awesome things for the city, which I love. I've been a part of the city since 2010. Came here for school and stuck around because I loved it. Lost the word. Oh, I got it. Okay, so my question is, or my statement rather, would be that ranked choice voting is a more effective way of running a representative government like the one we have, and I love you guys. I voted for you specifically. And
Thank you.
a lot of these other folks, Deb and and so it seems to be just a better way of having a government. And we already lead in energy, and I'd like to see us lead in the way that we run our city as well.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I'm not necessarily familiar with the paradigm that you're talking about, but if you could get me your contact information so I can get a little bit more information of what you're describing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful, yes. Okay, thank you all so much for coming. I hope it didn't stretch out too long, but again, thank you. Don't hesitate to get a card, fill it out, and if you have a question that didn't get answered, write it down and get it to someone, and we'll make sure that we can get your answer to you. Thank you all so much for coming, and have a great evening.